In this lesson, we'll work on building out the texture for our kitchen table. Alright, so as I mentioned at the end of the previous lesson, we're going to use pretty much the same techniques that we used to build out the texture for this kitchen cabinet. So if you're already pretty familiar with this process, you're welcome to go ahead and skip ahead to the next lesson, where we'll go ahead and work on some additional lighting aspects of this scene. But if you want to go ahead and stick around and see this process again, we'll go ahead and go through that. So for this kitchen table, let's start with the MIA material X, just like what we've done in the past. So there we are, MIA material X. And I'll go ahead and start with another volume noise. So we'll bring this in, and we'll set it to pretty much the same beginning values that we had for our cabinets in our previous lesson. So we'll drop in a volume noise, set it to wispy. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and start to bring in the coloration for this. So again, this is going to be back in Utilities, and this is the remap value. So let's go ahead, we'll take our volume noise, middle click, plug that into the input value. Now let's take our remap value and find this color slider here. We can go ahead and remove one of those, that way we're just left with one. Doesn't really matter where we put it at this point because we'll wind up with the same color on both sides. So let's start with this color. Again, we'll use our eyedropper tool, and in our little swatch file that we had pulled in a few lessons earlier, let's go ahead and sample this kind of a dark wood color up here. Now, just like what we had done in one of our earlier lessons, let's take this node, or this part in our gradient. Let's go ahead and add in two of these, and then right between them, let's add in something that's a little bit darker. So again, switch this to an HSV, add something that's just a little bit darker in here, just fairly subtle. And now let's go ahead, let's drop in a gamma correct. So let's see if we can find this. There we are, gamma correct. Let's take our remap value, make sure we plug that into that, and make sure we drop our gamma down to 0.45. Excellent. Now, once we've done all those things, we can take our gamma correct, plug that into the color. Very nice. And now we can assign that to the different areas of our table. So let me just very quickly come in, grab those areas of our table, and I'll go ahead and do the same thing for this chair as well. So I'll go ahead and have these chair legs be pretty much that same material. So let's come in just very quickly, grab these. We got one last chair over here, so let's quickly select those different pieces. Okay, so that should be everything we need. Let's go back to the Hypershade, right-click, and assign Material to Selection. Okay, so let's go back to our camera view. Again, I always try to make it a habit of just checking everything from this default camera perspective, so that way I can always just make sure that everything is looking just as it should be. That way we're not having to make sure that taking any kind of second guesses or trying to guess about how it's going to look in this final scene, rather than zooming in and trying to see it from every angle. Just make it a habit of viewing and rendering from this camera bookmark that we have set up. So you can see this pattern that we start to get in here is really nothing close to a wood pattern. The overall coloration is probably pretty good, but you know, as far as any sort of wood pattern that we have here, it's really not working out very well. So let's go back to our Place 3D texture. Right, similar to what we had to do in our previous lesson, we're going to have to take that 3D placement node and really scale this up, so that way we can actually start to see the individual patterns. What's occurring here is because this Place 3D texture node is so small in our scene, that means that this pattern that we get is so tiny that it just shows up as noise at this point. So let's go ahead and scale this up a little bit. Now, in our previous lesson, we saw how we can take this Place 3D texture node and scale this up to start to create some long striations to kind of mimic this wood grain. Now, in my case, I want these long striations to sort of run along in this direction. So I'm going to take this new Place 3D texture node and scale it out in what was going to be its Z-axis. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So back to camera view and re-render. Here we are, off to a pretty good start. So now you can start to see some appearance of what looks a little bit more like a wood grain. Now in my case, I might take this Place 3D texture node and scale this out just a little bit more along that Z-axis. So that way we can get a little bit longer striation in this wood pattern. Okay, very nice. I actually like that a little bit more. So compared to what we had previously, it still looks a little bit more just kind of like a noise or some kind of distortion on here. But with that stretched out a little bit more, we start to get, again, just a little bit more of a realistic appearance of some kind of a nice wood grain on here. Okay, very nice. So we've got now a pretty good start to this table. We'll go ahead and leave the chair cushions for now. We'll go ahead and come back to those a little bit later in this course. But what we want to do now is start to turn our attention back to some of these lighting elements that are missing. So in our next lesson, we'll begin the process of setting up some lights for some of these different hanging lights back here.